Saturday was supposed to be easy. Cinnamon rolls, a Cricket birthday banner, my husband turning 41. I took the trash out and heard him in the garage, laughing on speaker. Monday, she signs the POA. She's soft. She signs anything. I don't sleep in the same bed anymore. She was useful. I stood there with the trash lid in my hands and felt something lock into place. At brunch, he kissed my forehead, called me a rock, and said we'd swing by the notary for his Aunt Lila, the woman whose blue porch practically raised me. That afternoon at Magnolia View, Lila's eyes cleared like a storm breaking. She grabbed my wrist. "Don't let anybody take my porch. Don't sign, baby." Monday, he laid a leather folder on the counter. I picked up my tote, wallet, water, bills, and drove past the notary to the courthouse. A clerk tapped his stapler twice and slid me a name, Legal Aid, Suite 204. The lawyer listened, drew 3 boxes on a pad, and said, "Fear is information. Let's make a move." By Wednesday, we were in a courtroom that had seen every version of this story. My husband sat 2 rows back, tie perfect, smile empty. The judge looked at me longer than she looked at the papers and said, "Ms. Clark?" And that's when everything turned. The emergency hearing landed Wednesday morning in a courtroom where the carpet had seen better seasons and the judge had seen every version of this story. Patrice stood at Naomi's side with a file that looked heavier than paper. Brandon sat 2 rows back in a navy suit with a tie that said electable and a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Your Honor," Patrice said, handing up exhibits, "we are not here to fight about money. We are here to pause the transfer of power arranged without informed consent. We have evidence of fraudulent inducement and conflict of interest. My client's aunt stated she did not want to sign. Medications were changed without a lawful agent. We ask for a narrow order. Temporary guardianship for 15 days, no discharge, no property transfer, no changes to the medication plan without court approval." Brandon's attorney, polished, performative patience fraying at the edges, talked about efficiencies and resources and how emotions can cloud judgment. Naomi watched his mouth move and thought of how many rooms like this had heard those words about women like her. When the judge asked Naomi to speak, she kept her voice simple. "My aunt told me not to sign," she said, palms damp, throat tight, words finding a bridge anyway. She had a pair of gloves that she had knitted herself, and they were blue. She said her porch matters. It's where she got through chemo. It's where she taught me how to be a person. I believe her. I don't trust this plan. The judge studied Naomi's face longer than she studied the documents. "Ms. Clark," she said, "temporary guardianship granted to you for 15 days, no discharge from Magnolia View, no property transfer, no changes to the medication plan without court approval." Patrice squeezed Naomi's elbow. "Breathe," she whispered. Naomi exhaled like a tire that had been carrying too much. Outside the courtroom, Brandon approached, smile thin as paper. "You made a scene," he said softly, fiercer than if he'd shouted. "For strangers." Naomi lifted her chin. "For family," she said, "and for myself." "The internet will love this," he said. "Unstable wife refuses to help elderly aunt. I sincerely hope your principal doesn't mind the kind of attention you're courting." Fear flickered under Naomi's ribs like a match. She blew it out. "Speak to me through counsel," she said. "Or don't speak to me at all." That night, Lila spiked a fever. Naomi rode in an ambulance, knees pressed against a gurney's metal rail, counting down seconds like prayers. At the ER, under harsh lights where time seems to stand on one leg, Dr. Theo Raines explained each step without rush. He looked like he'd been awake for days and still meant every word. He said, "Sepsis. We caught it early. She's strong. We'll hit this hard." Naomi nodded, grateful for verbs that carried weight. When he left, Lila squeezed her fingers and cracked her eyes open. "You did good," she murmured. Naomi laughed weirdly because crying would drown her. She said, "It's been a week." "Maybe the week," she whispered. She drifted back to sleep, mouth softening. Naomi pressed her forehead to their joined hands and let the crying come anyway, for the porch, For every pen she had held like a peace treaty, for every time she had chosen quiet to keep peace for someone who didn't notice. After midnight, Naomi opened her laptop. She created a folder labeled Taxes 2017 because she had learned that sometimes safety looked like misdirection. She copied into it the files a young woman had slid across a diner table hours earlier. The Bluebird Diner off Canton Road had smelled like bacon and coffee that had sat too long on the burner. Naomi had stirred a mug of something she didn't want while she waited. The trees had called in a favor. An informal friend might meet her. At 7:15, a woman slid into the vinyl booth, hair in a loose bun, campaign badge clipped to her tote. "Gabby," she said, "I interned at Cobb Forward, the urban renewal push your husband keeps hashtagging. I didn't like what I saw." She wrapped a thumb drive in a napkin and nudged it over. "Emails," Gabby said. "Draft contracts from Westfold developers, talking points. There's a series of deals tied to POAs. The nonprofit is covered to get sympathetic press and grants. It feeds into a for-profit management company. Cash flows to the developer. The clause about right of first refusal would empty your aunt's black before anyone notices." Naomi's eyes stung. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Gabby bit her lip. "Because my mama would kill me if I stayed quiet. And because watching women get steamrolled to make room for craft breweries makes me sick." She lowered her voice. "Check your aunt's med orders. There's a doctor who signs a lot of discharges right before unexpected moves. Klein." It wasn't thunder. It was confirmation. A clue falls different when it lands on something you were already afraid was true. At 1 a.m., Naomi's email pinged. Subject line, clarification, from Camden Klein, MD. Dr. Klein wrote like a man unaccustomed to being questioned. He wanted to clarify the necessity of recent med changes. He CC'd Magnolia View's administrator and, oddly, Brandon. Naomi hit reply all and added Patrice. She kept it short. "No changes without court approval per order attached. Please remove Mr. Clark from any health communications not authorized by me." She attached the judge's order and a PDF of the specific paragraph highlighted. She slept for 2 hours and woke with a feeling under her ribs she didn't recognize. Later, she would realize the feeling had a name. Safety, provisional and small, but present. News moves fast when a story has clean angles. Within a week, a local reporter at the Marietta Daily Journal ran a piece on urban renewal deals linked to private POAs. She didn't name Naomi, but she quoted Patrice and photographed a porch, blue paint peeling in romantic close-up. The piece was shared to the neighborhood group, to a mom's forum Naomi hadn't looked at since 2016, to a Facebook page where people sold baby clothes and asked about trustworthy roofers. Brandon blew up Naomi's phone with messages she didn't answer. Tori posted on Facebook about family traders, and Naomi's friend Janelle from the elementary school texted, "You okay? I'm bringing muffin mix and my loudmouth. Also, I printed that article because internet erases things." A woman Naomi didn't know DM'd her, "He did this to my grandma's house in Smyrna. Bless you." The message ended with a prayer hands emoji and 3 red hearts, women's code. By Monday, Magnolia View's administrator called to apologize for any misunderstanding. By Wednesday, Dr. Klein's signature vanished from Leela's chart like a ghost finally exorcised. In its place stood a careful conservative care plan Naomi had been asking for all along. "Sometimes the threat of sunlight is enough," Patrice said dryly when Naomi told her. "Sometimes you have to open the blinds." The county scheduled a public comment night on redevelopment. Naomi wrote her name on the speakers list with a pen that didn't tremble. The room filled with the polite hum of bureaucracy, papers shuffled, a coffin to a sleeve, a man behind Naomi whispering to his wife that he had to get home for the game. Naomi's name was called. She stepped to the podium, hands steady on the edge, and spoke into a microphone that had amplified hundreds of ordinary pleas. "My name is Naomi Clark. I'm a school secretary on Lower Roswell Road. I make casseroles for funerals and cheat at church bingo. I am not an activist by nature." Laughter, small and real, rolled back to her. "But this is about people, not parcels. My aunt's porch is where she survived chemo. It's where I learned that women can love loud and still be called too much. If you're going to tear down what holds us together, say it plain. Don't hide it behind a nonprofit with a cute logo." She looked straight at Brandon, where he sat 2 rows back, tie perfect, temple pulsing. "And if you're going to use family to do it, don't expect us to sign." The room, quiet with the kind of listening that matters, started clapping before she stepped away. It wasn't a stadium roar, it was many small hands finding the same rhythm. Things didn't become easy. Life rarely rewards courage with convenience. Brandon filed to separate. He posted a long note on his campaign page about private family matters and hysterical accusations, and then he quietly took it down when the comments didn't go his way. Westfold developers ghosted him. His inbox, once full of men with plans, grew thin. He moved to a rental downtown with a view of cranes and the long, humbling road back from the story he'd told himself about who he was. HR called Naomi into the principal's office one afternoon. Mrs. Alvarez, who wore busy prints and had the air of a woman who sent firm emails and cried at school musicals, shut the door and said, "You have people calling the front desk. We're telling them to call your lawyer. Are you okay?" "I'm learning," Naomi said. And then, because Ms. Alvarez's eyes were the kind that invited honesty, she added, "I'm a little shaken." Miss Alvarez smiled gently. "You are not the first woman to walk through this. You won't be the last. If you need a few mornings to be late, take them. If anyone gives you trouble, tell them the principal said to talk to me." She slid a small bag across the desk. "Janelle told me about your stress tea situation. I am a lavender person." Naomi held the bag like a precious thing. "Thank you." The HOA sent a letter questioning whether Robin's Egg Blue was on the approved porch color list. Naomi laughed when she read it, a short, incredulous sound. She took the letter to the next meeting with a plate of lemon squares and read the rule book aloud, finger steady under a sentence that said, "Colors must be harmonious with community aesthetics. Blue is the color of every front door on this street in April," she said, smiling warm and pointed. The porch stays. The letter never came up again. Lila came home to the blue porch, a visiting nurse checking vitals, and Naomi buying a second-hand lift chair off Facebook Marketplace. Dr. Raines recommended a social worker who knew a carpenter, who knew a painter, who knew a retired electrician who didn't mind small jobs. The porch steps got a new railing. The azaleas got a trim. Naomi learned to say, "We can't do it all today," and mean it. On Sundays after church, kids from the neighborhood came to drink lemonade and hear Lila tell stories about the summer of '79 when she and Naomi's mother painted protest signs on that very porch, and the paint never quite came off their arms. Lila would hold up her forearm and say, "Porches hold revolutions," the small kind that make the big ones possible. And the kids would giggle, like revolutions were something you could hold in your pocket if you wanted. Late in August, Naomi sat at the kitchen table with a stack of papers from Patrice and a notebook she had bought with a pink cover like armor. She wrote in 10-minute bursts, because that's what she had. 10 minutes between meds, 10 minutes between calls, 10 minutes between the doorbell and the dog barking across the street. What she wrote down surprised her. She expected to write anger. What came out was a ledger of small kindnesses. The way O'Hara had tapped the stapler twice, like a secret code. Shonda's hope earrings catching light as she slid a chart toward Naomi. Gabby's napkin-wrapped drive. Ms. Alvarez's lavender tea. Women, mostly. Men, too. The kindness made a net that held her while she learned how to stand on a different kind of floor. On a Wednesday morning, thick with heat, Naomi stood in front of a storefront with a faded Ace Hardware sign still ghosting its way across the glass. The landlord said it needed vision and elbow grease and would rent to her at a discount if she promised to stop by his mother's place and explain the Medicaid letter that came every month like a riddle. Naomi painted the walls a white that seemed to hold light. Janelle brought in racks from her cousin's dry cleaner and a bucket of mismatched hangers. Shonda showed up with a blood pressure cuff and a folding table. The retired electrician installed new lights in exchange for Naomi's famous chicken spaghetti casserole and the promise that someone would talk to her granddaughter about FAFSA forms. Dr. Raines carved out 2 hours a week.
Gabby assembled a bulletin board with index cards that said in block letters, "Lawyer who calls back," "Social worker who will return a voicemail," "Allergy-safe diapers," all Alon H's AA meeting list. They named it the Front Steps. The sign wasn't fancy. Hand-painted letters strung under a strand of Christmas lights Naomi left up on purpose. She wanted it to feel like a place where you could show up with a story and not be asked to make it prettier. People came. A woman with a fresh bruise and 2 toddlers found the clothing closet and an appointment card for a counselor who charged on a sliding scale. A man whose check was garnished for a debt he didn't recognize sat with Patrice's volunteer and made calls in a calm voice until the right person at the right agency said the magic combination of 3 words. "We'll fix it." A teenage girl with a baby asked if anyone knew how to make a bottle when you don't have a stove. A retired bus driver said, "You can make it like camping," and drew a picture on a napkin of a water bath and a thermometer from the Dollar Tree. On a Thursday that started gray and decided to rain in the afternoon, Naomi found a manila envelope slid under the Front Steps door. Inside was a printout of an email thread on West Fold letterhead, laid out a plan that looked like a heist storyboard. Identify elderly homeowners with no nearby family, find friendly physicians to sign, make property market ready, and talk to a PR firm about neighborhood storytelling. There were dates and initials and a sentence at the end that made Naomi feel the exact opposite of soft. Women sign faster when reassured by a female relative. Naomi carried the envelope to the Marietta Journal, sat with a reporter named Rhea Caldwell, and told the story slow and careful and complete. Rhea took notes on paper because she didn't trust audio files to not get mysteriously corrupted when stories got close to money. "I'm not a crusader," Naomi said. "I'm a woman who stopped signing. That's all." "That's a headline," Rhea said, writing it down. Brandon tried to smear. He posted a clip labeled "My Truth" and spoke about his estranged spouse and his unfortunate in-law situation and how effective governance often requires difficult personal decisions. The comments turned. People he'd courted for donations said they were busy. Westfold called his phone twice and didn't leave a message. On a Tuesday evening at the Front Steps, Dr. Raines stayed late, sleeves rolled, asking an older man gentle questions about chest tightness while Naomi swept the entry. He stepped into the doorway after and leaned against the frame. "You're good at this," he said.
"At what?" Naomi asked. "Holding a room steady," he said, smiling. "It's a skill." "I thought my best skill was keeping the peace," Naomi said. "Turns out sometimes peace is a lie someone sells you, so they can keep the things they want." He raised an eyebrow. "You learning to like being the squeaky wheel?" "I'm learning to be a wheel that knows where it's going," she said. She surprised herself with the answer and how true it felt in her mouth. They didn't flirt. They didn't make promises. They exchanged numbers in the bland, practical way of people who might need to text about lab results or ask who has a spare walker. Naomi felt, again, the steadying click of a support she hadn't realized was missing. At home, under a sky that still held heat even after the sun had decided to call it a day, Naomi sat on the porch with Lila. The blue paint glowed soft in the evening. Across the street, the kid with the portable hoop took free throws until the ball funked soft and true. Crickets tuned up like a choir. "You ever think about naming your porch?" Lila asked, voice stronger now that the fever was behind them. Naomi laughed. "What would we name it?" "Stubborn," Lila said. "Or Mercy. Maybe both." "I like Mercy," Naomi said. "It makes stubborn sound less like a dare and more like a promise." "Porches hold revolutions," Lila said again, not like a slogan, but like a fact. The small kind, the kind that looks like signing your own name with your own hand. Naomi felt tears rise and let them sit without moving them along. "You told me not to sign." Lila patted her knee. "I told you to listen." Fall walked in a little early that year, something about the light making everything look more honest. The front steps put out a box for coats and another for gently used interview shoes. Patrice started a Wednesday night clinic titled Paperwork and Pie and made phone calls while people ate desserts that belonged at funerals and weddings alike. Shonda managed a flu shot station like a commander fielding a battalion. The county posted an agenda item about ethics. Brandon's name sat on a line that looked innocuous if you didn't know how much trouble can hide in 9 black letters. The audit came. It looked like slow soap. Nothing for a while, and then suddenly, bubbles everywhere. Dr. Klein's license landed under review. The HOA sent a note congratulating Naomi for a community service recognition someone nominated her for at the neighborhood potluck. And Naomi laughed because life sometimes arrived with petty cruelty and petty kindness in the same envelope. Thanksgiving came. Naomi roasted a turkey like a person determined to carve something correctly in at least one part of her life. Tori sent a card without a return address that said, "I'm sorry," and a $100 Publix gift card. Naomi slipped it in the drawer where she kept stamps and notepads and things that might be good later. Forgiveness, she was learning, wasn't a gate you throw open. It was a hinge that opened in millimeters. There were setbacks that didn't make the paper. The day the pipes at the front steps burst and the retired electrician had to call in a plumber who charged in cash and left with banana bread wrapped in foil. The morning Lila fell asleep in her lift chair and woke with a panic that her mother was angry she'd been late for school. Naomi sat on the floor and said, "You're right on time," until the fear loosened. The afternoon, a woman yelled in Naomi's face about how the pantry hours had changed, and then came back 3 days later with a bag of powdered sugar donuts and eyes that said, "I'm sorry," without saying it. In January, the Marietta paper ran a feature with a photo of Naomi and Lila on the porch. Lila in a scarf with small red apples printed on it, Naomi with a strand of hair down that made her look younger than she felt. The headline read, "She stopped signing and started something." People taped the article to their refrigerators like a prayer. One night, closing alone, Naomi found a note tucked under the front steps door, folded in half, written in a hand that had decided to trust again. "Don't know you, saw your speech, my mama lost her house, took my boy for free diapers today, needed you to know. J." Naomi stood in the doorway with the note pressed to her chest. The streetlight turned the air gold, and the sound of a train slid across the night like a memory. She felt the shape of her life, not tidy, not safe, but honest. At home, she poured sweet tea into 2 glasses and carried them to the porch. Lila dozed in her chair. A neighbor walked by with a dog in a sweater that the dog barely tolerated. Naomi set the tea down and leaned on the rail, paint smooth under her palms. "I'm done being small," she said out loud, not to the air, but to the porch, to the woman in the lift chair, to the version of herself who would have signed Monday because signing kept the peace. "I'm done." No one applauded. No angels descended. The porch, faithful witness, held the sentence like it would hold 1,000 more.
Winter passed. Lila's hair thinned and grew back softer. Brandon's face showed up less and less in places where people paid to hear men talk about the future. The audit concluded in language that made eyes glaze and then sharpen. Irregularities, self-dealing, remanded for further action. Dr. Klein's name slid off the hospital website quietly. Rhea Caldwell won an award. She accepted an address she'd bought secondhand and altered at her kitchen table. The front steps got a mini grant to upgrade the food pantry fridge. Naomi cried about it for 30 seconds in the back office and then called Shonda, who hollered into the phone like she just won a car. They celebrated with a sheet cake and the kind of white frosting that leaves little ridges on your fork. It tasted like birthdays and funerals and everything in between. In March, Naomi's principal asked her to speak at the school's career day. Naomi stood in front of 4th graders who wanted to be astronauts, YouTubers, dog trainers, and said, "Sometimes your job is a title and a paycheck. Sometimes your job is what you build because the world needed a thing that didn't exist yet. Both count." A hand shot up. "What do you do when someone tells you to do something you don't want to do?" a kid in a Spider-Man shirt asked. "You say, 'I'm going to think about that,' and then you find a grown-up who helps you make a plan." After, Miss Alvarez hugged her and whispered, "You're a walking plan." In late spring, the front steps hosted a porch party. their name for a fundraiser that sold nothing and asked for nothing, and yet filled jars on tables with crumpled tins. A local duo played acoustic guitar. The retired electrician tried to two-step with Shonda, who pretended she didn't know how until she did. Patrice told a story about a woman who got her GED at 52 and went to work for a program that helped other women do the same. Gabby brought a new intern named Ari, who looked at Naomi like she was a version of a future that felt possible. Naomi stood at the edge of the room and watched a kid build a tower out of canned corn. She thought about the day O'Hara had tapped his stapler twice and how it had sounded like a secret handshake. She thought about how you can build a life out of the kinds of clues that people leave when they trust you to put them to use. She thought about how small she had felt and how that smallness had been a habit, not a truth. Aunt Leela found her by the wall and pressed a folded paper into her palm. "What's this?" Naomi asked. "Something I wrote. We're an oral history family, but sometimes paper carries a day better." Naomi unfolded it, in Leela's looping hand. "The porch holds revolutions. The steps hold our feet. The railing holds the lean of our backs when we get tired. When someone tells you a signature is a love language, remember, love doesn't require silence. It requires presence. I'm here. Be here too." Naomi read it again, and then again, until the words were more than ink. They were muscle memory. June arrived with heat that made the asphalt shimmer like a mirage. Naomi put a white folding table on the porch with a sign that said, "Ask me about guardianship." The first day, 2 women stopped. The second day, 4. By the end of the week, Naomi had a stack of names and numbers and a spreadsheet that Patrice promised to hate and use in equal measure. Brandon saw Naomi once in the coffee shop near the courthouse, a line of tired people stretching out the door. He looked thinner, the way men look when they no longer have an entourage. He nodded. Naomi nodded. Her heart did not gallop. He was a person who had been a thunderstorm. Now he was weather you check and plan around. They didn't speak. She didn't need to. Late one night, Naomi found herself writing again at the kitchen table. Lines that were not a memoir, not a manifesto, something smaller and more pointed. She wrote about the sound a stapler makes when it is used on your behalf. She wrote about sticky notes with names that become lifelines. She wrote about the way a nurse can press a chart toward you like a blessing. She wrote about not signing and signing, because she still signed things. You have to. The world runs on forms. But now the signature felt like a bridge, not a surrender. She made copies and set them on the front steps counter. People took them, folded them into wallets, tucked them into purses next to grocery lists. One day a teenager brought one back crumpled and soft at the edges. He said, "My mom read this. She cried. She said to tell the lady thanks." He shuffled. "I didn't know who the lady was." Naomi smiled. "Tell her the lady said she's welcome." The day the azaleas burned bright again, Naomi painted one step on the porch a new coat of blue. She did it slow, carefully, the way you do something you intend to see every day. A neighbor walked by and said, "You missed the spot." And Naomi laughed and said, "Did I? Look at that. Thank you." She dabbed her brush in the paint and smoothed the line, satisfied by the way a small correction can make a whole picture look like it was meant to be that way all along. There were hard days still. There would always be. Leela had a night where the pain made her curse like a sailor and cry like a child. Shonda lost an uncle and came to work anyway because sitting at home felt like drowning. Dr. Raines got called away to a crisis that put the clinic on hold for 2 weeks. The retired electrician fell and scared us all, and then recovered and came by to reattach a gutter like nothing had happened. A woman I had been helping disappeared for a while and then returned with a black eye and a new voice that said, "Help me move, now." They did.
On the anniversary of the emergency hearing, Naomi took a small frame out of the drawer at the front steps. Inside, crisp and official, the line read, "Temporary guardianship granted." She hung it on the back wall, not to gloat, but to mark a day when a judge in a tired, carpeted room had looked at Naomi's face and decided to pause the machinery long enough for a woman to find her voice. A girl of about 10 wandered in with a friend and stood reading the framed paper aloud like it was a poem. "What's that mean?" the friend asked. The girl shrugged, wise. "Means she didn't let them push her around," the girl said. "Means she told the judge what was true." Naomi pretended to be busy because you cannot cry in front of other people's children in a way that makes them worry. She adjusted a stack of flyers and breathed on a laugh that had a cry's soft center. That evening, Naomi sat on the porch with Leela and held her hand. A breeze lifted the edge of the newspaper and set it down gently, as if the day itself agreed things had landed where they needed to. Naomi looked out at the street where the kid with the portable hoop now walked a dog of his own in a sweater it barely tolerated. "Remember when I thought love was keeping my voice low?" Naomi asked. Leela squeezed. "You discovered love is sometimes a courtroom and a clipboard and a nurse with good earrings." "And a porch," Naomi said. "And a porch," Leela agreed. Naomi lifted her glass and made a toast just for them. "To the women who signed their own names," she said, "and to the men who learned to clap for that." They drank their sweet tea and listened to the crickets sing like they knew the words to a song that had been handed down and made new every time it was sung. Across the street, a porch light flicked on. Down the block, someone laughed, the kind of laugh you only hear when the dishes are done and the day has decided to be kind. Naomi leaned back against the railing. She didn't think about Monday. She didn't plan out loud. She sat in the moment she had made and felt the way it held. When people later asked her how it happened, how a school secretary made a room that collected people and sent them back into the world a little less alone, she would say it like a recipe that leaves out the exact amount of salt because it's supposed to. "I stopped signing the things that stole from me," she'd say, "and I started signing the things that made other people steadier. That's all." It wasn't all, of course. It was 100 small decisions, and a clerk with a stapler, and a nurse with hoop earrings, and a lawyer who said fear is information, and a doctor who explained sepsis like it was a map they could read together. It was a porch and a pink color and a promise that wasn't grand but was kept, which made it more powerful than grand could ever be. On a night when the air felt like a soft hand on her arm, Naomi whispered the line she had been teaching herself, and the line had been teaching her back. "Steadiness isn't silence. It's holding the line until truth shows up on paper." The porch listened like it always had. Somewhere a train moved across town, heavy and sure. Naomi stayed, present and unafraid. A woman who had learned her own name and what it could do when it was written where it belonged.